Thank you very much for your introduction. Thank you for being here with the rainy I just brought on purpose from Milan. I'm sorry for that, but I think at the end of the day it's fresh. When I was talking with Ritu Padai about the presentation to be held today, I was asked to do something about fashion design practice, which is the main theme of my presentation. But I couldn't talk about fashion design practice without giving a frame of what is going on in the fashion industry right now. And I would like to start with a sentence that to me it's really interesting. Design is an attempt to make a contribution through change. When no contribution is made or can be made, the only process available for giving the illusion of change is styling. You will be probably surprised to discover that this sentence was written in 1960 by a cultural critic named Vance Packard that published a book which was called The Wastemakers. And he was quoting a sentence from George Nelson, which is recognized as one of the fathers of industrial design, modern industrial design and project design in the States. It's crazy, it was done in the 60s, but I think it's very contemporary. One thing that was interesting about the book of Vince Packard was that he divided planned obsolescence into two subcategories: obsolescence of desirability and obsolescence of function. Obsolescence of desirability, also called psychological obsolescence, refer to marketers' attempt to wear out a product in the owner's mind. I think this is kind of what is happening today in the fashion industry as well. And it's interesting to reflect on that. But why? I tried to collapse in few points all the mess that is going on at this moment. There are many different aspects to be taken into consideration when facing fashion industry nowadays. Number one, ethics and sustainability. Number two, global warming, wars, and general political instability of countries. Third, global industry and the model of the online buying. The fast fashion and the see now, buy now phenomenon that is going through in the industry. Ethics and sustainability. I loved the marketing approach of Patagonia. Don't buy this jacket, probably you are familiar with. In an interview, the owner of Patagonia was stating that obviously it doesn't mean that people shouldn't buy his products, because at the end of the day, it's industry, it's business. But what he was meaning with that, and this was a few years ago, was that if you really do not need this jacket, if both physically or psychologically, don't get it, because it will be just waste. When it comes to ethics, there are, when it comes to sustainability, there are so many things to be taken care of. Organic, bio, dyeing without water, fur-free, vegetable tanning, reuse, recycle, upcycle, all terms with which we are all mostly, or we think we are familiar, that are not necessarily put in place all the time. Recently, I visited the headquarters of VF International in Lugano. VF International, for the ones who do not know it, is a huge group, an American group, that owns a lot of brands, from John Varvatos to Seven from Mankind, Eastpak, O'Neill, and whatever. The thing that is interesting that having a conversation with the president of it is that he said that, we are going sustainable slowly, because we cannot do that at the pace that the marketing would like to, and we're not declaring it. Because this kind of things has been used too much as marketing tools from companies without taking care at all of the whole supply chain, but just one or two products just to make a statement. And while we were discussing, I said, but do you think the market is ready? I mean, for instance, the fur thing is really important right now. I said, you know what? I thought the market was more ready than it appears to be. They said that in the last winter collection, they sold a new fur-free jacket in Germany, and they did 40% less than with the real fur. So the question is, when we talk about consumers, are they really so willing to have ethical and sustainable products? I think yes, but the problem is that we cannot use that as the only tool to propose designs. When it comes to ethics, which is a different thing from sustainability, I think you will have a long, fantastic discussion this afternoon with Caterina Occhio, which is here, the owner of CME, because ethics is another aspect that many brands have been taking into consideration. Sometimes I personally think not necessarily in the right way, meaning that they've been using it once more as a marketing tool. And often what we have witnessed is to see ugly products justified by the fact that they were produced ethically, which is not fashion at all. But I think that Caterina will be able, better than I do this afternoon, to go inside these kind of aspects. And then there is the global warming. Come on, it's raining in Dubai. What are we talking about? All the weather conditions worldwide are, I asked for that just for this sentence, you know, I'm very lucky. All the weather conditions worldwide are changing. There was a time when I was a teenager in which there were seasons, meaning that we were used to change our clothes every season, from wool, heavy stuff, to cotton and things. But now, everything is turned out. I mean, this winter in Milan was very warm, and people that did collections with very heavy stuff didn't sell them. Moreover, people are traveling more and more. So the seasons are not so significant anymore. We are going dressed up by layers. If I look at you sitting in this room, I could say, is it spring? Is it summer? Is it autumn? I don't know. Because we're wearing the same clothes all the year round at the end of the day. Also, our mindset toward clothes is different. Once, I mean, if you had a silk shirt, that was for summer or spring, not for winter. Come on. Who is thinking like that anymore? Nobody. And then the sad thing is about wars and instability. I mean, terrorism and all these kind of aspects are affecting a lot. I have friends that were presenting in Paris last fashion shows, and they were saying that it was half empty because many people were just afraid to travel there. So we have to take into consideration all these aspects. That doesn't mean that a designer should take on his own all these aspects, but at least be aware and consider when he designs. Let's go to the global industry model, the online. It's a blurring economy. The cross-border e-commerce is about 309 million consumers. That means that they're both across different countries. This morning I was hearing in CNN something, but I'm not very sure about the news because I've just was just watching television, that China is trying to stop cross-borders online buying because they're affected their internal market. Not sure about how true this will be or not, but I think this is another element. We are not designing for a country. We are not designing for a place. We are designing for the world, and the world is smaller. Also, one thing that we should take into consideration, and I've experienced that myself with my own collection, is that we were used to think at the beginning of the online effect that everybody was going to buy online through a computer. Now, perhaps in India, which is a very technological country, perhaps more than Italy, I would say, most of the buying online is done by mobile. That means to rethink totally the way you communicate your pieces, because the interface is totally different. And then the most discussed item of the season, the see now, buy now effect. Everybody in this room, I'm sure, is aware of what is going on. through magazines, online news, and whatever. Burberry will showcase men and women at the same time, and the collection will be immediately available. Tom Ford already did it. Prada did a midway. They did a normal collection, but at the end of the day, they selected one piece, not a case bag, to be sold directly after the show. Obviously, this kind of effect is changing totally the perception of what is going on into this field. Number one, we do not everybody is able to change totally the supply chain, because it's not an easy game to be ready after the show to sell to the consumer. Number two, are we sure this is the right way? I've been talking with different people in Milan about that, and there are very different thoughts. Let's say there is the side that says, this is the future, you cannot fight against the future, it's a new model, you just have to accept it and go on. Others are stating that perhaps this is not the right answer to the problem, and also because desirability is part of the game of fashion, or at least it should be. The problem is, as you know, generated by two main aspects. Number one, the fast fashion. You go into a Zara, Topshop, whatever, you get immediately what you want and you bring it back. Number two, and this is even worse, is the availability of the images from fashion shows and from streaming that makes the final consumer aware of what will be there in the store in 6 months, and they're just struggling to have it immediately. But are we sure this is the right response? I do not have an answer personally, but what I'm sure about is that there will be many different ways of responding to that. Still, when you design a collection, you cannot think anymore at a supply chain as it has been before, because not necessarily this will be the game in which you will play. I would like to talk a little bit about that, of Lee Edelcourt. I guess everybody has gone through the AntiFashion Manifesto. With the provocative fashion is that quote. There are a few sentences that I think are interesting to discuss about that. And what she says to me, it's kind of provocative. I do not necessarily personally agree 100% with all, but I think it's really useful to make a reflection about that. As a result, the fashion world is still working in a 20th century mode, celebrating the individual, elevating the it people, developing the exception in a society hungry for consensus and altruism. This places fashion out of society and de facto makes it old-fashioned. This is an aspect that it's contradictory, because on one side we all know that fashion cannot be old-fashioned, but on the other hand, are we sure that fashion itself is ready to transform its fundamental roots from being a language to be a conglomerate of clothes and altruism? Fashion has always been based upon individuality, upon showing off, upon making a statement. Is it changing? Many people, especially the ones that work in technology, are already very far from fashion as we conceive it. And I think that this is a question we should ask ourselves. One thing that she said that touched me personally, and I'm very happy she said that, because this is something that is not happening in the school I manage, is that students are trained to become catwalk designers, highly individual stars and divas to be discovered by luxury brands. Come on, this is something that shouldn't happen, because this will create an emptiness of a concept and meaning into what we are doing. Then she gets into different chapters. Cost cutting. The first to be sacrificed are knitting and weaving ateliers. As a result, the students are no longer instructed into the textile creation and basic knowledge about cloth. This means that European fiber, yarns, and textile industry are threatened with extinction, and without them, the knowledge of spinning, weaving, finishing, and printing will be lost. Luckily, I would like to say that it's not completely true. In 2008, many Italian brands started outsourcing, and many Italian artisans and small laboratories, both in the textile and the accessory side, were struggling because of that. Finally, luckily, after a few years, they rediscovered the fact that they couldn't absolutely do that because the Made in Italy otherwise would have been lost. So they're coming back. We have got some losses out of that because not everybody has been able to resist, let's say, but the craftsmanship is coming back with a very strong accent. And I'm very honored to be part of the Fondazione Cologni dei Mestieri d'Arte, which is a foundation that is devoted to pricing high-end artisans and to promote to young generation the culture of making that is part of our culture. Let's go to supply chains. Rapid and sordid restructuring processes, which has seen production leave the Western world to profit from and exploit low-wage countries. Now that several garments are offered cheaper than a sandwich, we all know and feel that something is profoundly and devastatingly wrong. But worst of all, it's the symbolism of all. Price profess that these clothes are to be thrown away, discarded as a condom and forgotten before being loved and savored, teaching young consumers that fashion has no value. The culture of fashion is thus destroyed. I would like to make a point on that. It's easy to talk about fast fashion. Everybody worldwide is against fast fashion because of this reason. Still, are we sure that all high-end fashion is produced differently? Frankly speaking, I'm working into this field since almost 30 years now, and I've seen many brands, important brands, producing in Bangladesh. So, if we need to make a discourse about that, perhaps we should start making it seriously. Obviously, it's easy to talk about fast fashion because when you pay $40 for a pair of trousers, it's clear, crystal clear to everybody that they cannot have been done in a certain approach, ethical and sustainable. But are we sure that a polo with a fantastic logo on top of that has been done nationally with workers that have been paid what was right and with no exploitation of anybody's work? I am not, frankly speaking. The price is not just the only system through which we should look at that. On marketing. It is without doubt the perversion of marketing that ultimately has helped kill the fashion industry. I mean, she's very positive, I would say, come on. Initially invented to be a science, blending forecasting talent with market results to ensure strategies for the future, it has gradually become a network of fearful guardians of brands, slaves to financial institutions, hostages of shareholders' interest, a group that long ago lost the autonomy to direct them. I think we can generally say, yes, it's true, but this is the game, baby. We are going internationally, and most of the independent brands have been acquired by huge groups, and huge groups are working that way. Rei Kawakubo said something interesting in a recent interview to The Guardian that I would suggest you to go through because I don't know if you like or appreciate her style, but I think she has been a real pioneer for fashion. And she was saying that she has been always taking care of her business herself because to be a businessman, a businesswoman into this field means to be creative, and that she always struggled not to be acquired by any group so that she could be independent and going on producing what she wanted. I think that for a fashion designer, this is a question to be made. We have many fashion designers at school, and many of them have very different dreams. Some are still dreaming to put together their own brand. Others are dreaming to work for the brands they love the most. someone else doesn't know what to do exactly, and I think these are the ones that will probably invent or reinvent their jobs, because they will be the more creative and questioning. But still, the point is that we really need to take care of what we do and to decide if we have it. And I know that here in Fashion Forward there are a lot of young, emerging, interesting brands, to understand where you want to end up. I don't think this is anymore the time for Giorgio Armani to be born. What will be in the future will be very tiny, niche, exclusive brands that will sell worldwide and will make their living. But the big giants, unless you will not go under the umbrella of a big corporation, will not be there. And the point is that not for all designers this is a good choice. We've seen many designers leaving their own brand, the brand they established after being acquired, because they couldn't express themselves anymore. So this is something that one should take care when making decisions. Oops, sorry. On journalism, this is another crucial point. Standards of journalism are slipping as knowledgeable fashion editors are replaced by younger writers with no specialist knowledge or critical perspective. The genial humor and knowledge of some of the best fashion journalists of international newspapers is rapidly replaced by uninteresting generalizations by a younger generation, articles that are opinion pages instead of critical assessment from a professional point of view. Come on, this is tough. I mean, I think it's right and wrong at the same time. I think that we need to take a look at the world as it has already changed. And you know, there was a nice quote. I don't know how many amongst you are familiar with Kino. He was a stripe comic designer in Chilean, and he had this character that was called Mafalda that was pretty famous. And there is a fantastic scene in which Mafalda is sitting in a park, and there are two elders talking about the past, how it was beautiful, and now the present is so horrible, and so on. And she says at a certain point, you know what I don't like about elder people is that they look at the future with the back of their head. So we need to be very careful when stating these kind of things, because there is something very true inside it. But at the same time, you cannot generalize. The way in which fashion was communicated until a few years ago is definitely different from the way it is communicated right now. And I wouldn't blame all the younger generations, because I'm sure that there are brilliant minds amongst them as well. The problem is that until now, probably, we have seen raising only the worst aspects of it. Meaning that every time we invite some journalists or some editors at school about these kind of items, there is a lot of discussion amongst them about the bloggers. They hate bloggers because bloggers are just tiny, nice girls dressing up and exploiting the fact that they have followers that are even more silly than them. There is this phenomena, so what? There are also people that are able to convey a message. And probably, if so many people are following the bloggers, as a journalist, they should ask themselves why and why they are not following them. Probably the language they're using is not anymore current. Probably they should question what they do. So, as you see, I don't think there is black and white. I think there are shades of gray, and we are all navigating into this gray to try to understand what will be next. On retail. Retailing has failed. Come on, another happy sentence. To move with the times, as a consequence, we are struggling with outdated formats that do not correspond anymore to today's fluid consumers, able to browse high and low, city and country, airport and hotel, online and in real time. This is kind of true. I mean, people are buying... Oh, sorry. It's going to fall up on us. No, never mind. It's okay. I wanted the rain, so I'm here. I mean, is it true? I mean, I think that in this room there are a lot of people traveling, and there is a problem when you travel, because you see the main capitals all over the world and you find the same boutique. But this happens when it comes to big brands. Perhaps we should be searching more for the new and for the interesting, which is there. Perhaps it's our mindset that is still old as customers, not just what the retailer has been doing. And here we are, the consumers. Oh my God. The consumers of today and tomorrow are going to choose for themselves, creating and designing their own wardrobes. They will share clothes amongst each other, since ownership doesn't mean a thing anymore. They will rent clothes, lend clothes, transform clothes, and find clothes on the streets. That's a nice image. Personally, perhaps I'm too old to think about that, but I will never, ever, ever rent my clothes to anybody. Even the cheap ones, because if I bought them, there is a reason why. Still, this is a very important quote because it reminds the society of lending that was already mentioned by the famous anthropologist long time ago. And this is something that is happening already when it comes, for instance, to car rentals or Uber or other aspects. Perhaps something will happen. There are already websites where you can lend a bag or an accessory for a special occasion. In the United States, usually they're much smarter because there is a practice that in Italy is not available, that you can go buy something, wear it, come back the day after and give it back and get cash back. Now they're trying to put some special tags to understand, some special chips to understand if the person has been wearing that piece and is cheating the company or not. But in any case, this is something that probably will happen, who knows. Then she says, fashion has lost this consumer over the last 20 years and will not be able to get back to them. Clothes will become the answer to our industry players. Clothes will dominate trends for the future. Therefore, let's celebrate clothes. Men are increasingly interested in fashion and accessories as well as cosmetic and fragrances. After all, it is in the atelier of couture that we will find the laboratory of this labor of love. Suddenly, the profession of couturier will become coveted, and the exclusive way of crafting couture will be inspiring all others. Yes and no. Many people think they know what couture is about, because we call couture a lot of stuff, which is not couture at all. Couture is hugely expensive. A real couture garment can cost 30,000 euros. So, are we saying here that the only fashion that will last will be just the one for the very few ones, for the 1%? It could be possible, but I don't think this is an answer. While I can agree a lot on the fact that coming back to the origin of clothes, but not clothes themselves, but the concept and the message they're conveying, that's the way. Let's go on looking at the situation. Everybody has been following the departure of many head and creative designers from the brands, from Albert Bast, from Lanvin, Massimiliano Giornetti from Salvatore Ferragamo, Stefano Pilati from Ermenegildo Zegna, Raf Simons from Dior. And he said, there is this interesting interview on WWD where he said that, I feel a lot of people are questioning, we have a lot of conversation about it. Where is it going? It's not only the clothes. And in the interview, he continues, you know, we did this collection in 3 weeks. Tokyo was also done in 3 weeks. Actually, everything is done in 3 weeks, maximum 5. And when I think back to the first couture show for Dior in July 2012, I was concerned because we only had 8 weeks, and we're talking about couture. The problem is when you have only one design team and 6 collections, there is no more thinking time. And I don't want to do collections where I'm not thinking. In this system, Peter is our assistant, and I can sit together and brainstorm, no time. Fashion became pop. I can't make up my mind if that's a good or a bad thing. The only thing I know is that it used to be elitist, and I don't know if one should be ashamed or not to admit that maybe it was nicer when it was more elitist. Not for everybody. Not high fashion is for everybody. The problem is stating, I think, is the problem that most fashion designers are struggling with in these days. No time for research, no time for conceptualization, no time for creating a storytelling, but just dresses. And the world is already full of nice dresses. What I always tell to my students, come on, we do not need another nice garment. It's full. Try to tell me something different. Try to make a statement. Try to tell me a story. But and I've been a promoter of the fast pace when designing, but fast pace is not this light velocity, because this doesn't allow anybody to make a thinking. Okay, I will rush. Okay. So, I was trying to put together what a fashion designer nowadays should be about. 3I, identity, inspiration, and innovation, and the skills that should be encompassed. I mean, this is a list just to go to the grocery store. Then there is much more than that. But it is fashion design skills, so research, material and fabrics, pattern making, sketching, technology, 3D printing, identity. We are not talking about collections, we are talking about the identity of the designer. A designer should be able to understand to whom he's talking and what is trying to convey. And this is not the work that can be done with one collection. This is a work that needs to be put in place when starting a new brand, because otherwise it doesn't make any sense to have another piece of garments here and there. Inspiration. We can call inspiration, we can call idea, we can call in a very different ways. But what counts at the end of the day is how it is developed in order to get to innovation. Innovation doesn't mean technology. Innovation means that a designer can put in place either a collection that makes sense or also a different business model, which was exactly what Rei Kawakubo did in 1969 when she started Comme des Garçons, not following the normal rules. Research. And this takes me to the problem I have with the younger generations, from scuba divers to surfers, as I love to say. Research is basically important, and time needs to be dedicated to it. It can be primary research, meaning research self-generated. It could be secondary research. It could be a research that is melted, but without that, our legs are too short to walk anywhere. Without a research, a concept cannot be stated, and no work can be put in place. These are some images from the workbook on my students that are asked, no matter the technology they're going to use, to still use this kind of tool to express themselves and to communicate their research in a different way. Materials and fabrics. One thing I was I really think it's important what Lee Edelkort was stating, is that nowadays younger generation do not have a clue about materials and fabrics. Sometimes I struggle when I welcome students that are coming to a master's because they do not know the naming of fabrications. When I was a student, oh my gosh, I feel like very old to say such things, but we were trained to close our eyes, to touch the fabrications and understand the composition and feel the weight and feel the effect that it could have brought to a garment. I still remember in the early 90s in London there was a fantastic setup of the store of Joseph Tricot, and there were these coats that were like felted, very, very rigid, and they were put just on the wall like pictures because they didn't need an hanger. All the design process was starting from the material. You cannot work just making nice sketches on a piece of paper and then expect it to take life in a proper way, saying something different. Also, when it comes to young designers, one thing that needs to be taken into consideration is the fact that industry, while we are talking about small realities, is not ready for them. Because when you go to supply chain, when you go to fabric and textile companies, they ask you to buy a minimum of 300 meters per color of each textiles. How can a young designer that is starting his own collection approach that? Just making intervention on the fabrics to make it different, perhaps. That could be a way. Pattern making. Oh, come on, this is another story. It's so boring to learn how to do pattern making or draping, isn't it? Most students do not like it, really. But some students, the good ones, really use it as a creative tool, as part of the process. And it has to be part of the process because once more, when you sketch, it's not enough. You have to see the 3D result of your sketching in order to understand if it works or not. And there are so many different approaches to that. It doesn't mean that you have to follow the traditional one. You can go on draping, you can go on TD patterns, and to many other systems that now are put in place. Sketching. There was a time in which every student was designing the same way. Luckily, it's not like that since a long time, and students are deciding how to showcase their work in very different ways, also coherently with the message they want to submit. And then technology. The laser cut. Gosh, all the students are crazy for the laser cut. We have it in the school, and everybody was just want to go and do laser cut, as well as 3D. Now, these are two technological tools that are very fashionable now. Everybody's crazy about them. Probably in the next 5 years, we will have, I don't know, another 10 or 15 to be used and learned and exploited. But sometimes students, it's like using ethics and sustainability as a marketing tools, tend to use this kind of tools, thinking they're creating something absolutely new and innovative, but probably this is not, because these tools are available to everybody. They need to know them, they need to use them, they need to understand how they work, but then they need to create their own language. The tool cannot become the driver of the design. And this is something that is also happening sometimes in architecture and design. I know that there are, my generation, when they were trained as architects or designers, they had to learn how to sketch by hands. And then they had, not being digital natives, they had to go and learn how to use AutoCAD or Rhinoceros or other programs. Now students tend to design directly on the computer. And this is, in terms of mindset, very different. Luckily, in fashion, is not yet fully like that. But it means that your creative approach to things is limited by the technological tool you're using. I have nothing against technology. I love technology. I'm always connected, and I'm always curious about that. But I think we should not be devoted by technology, but we have to learn how to use it. So, why scuba divers and surfers? Because when you do not have a strong research, when you do not have an insight on concept, when you do not really investigate the approach and the things you're doing, you're just surfers. You go very fast, but at the end of the day, are you sure you're getting to the point? And scuba divers, scuba divers are my generation. Scuba divers are slow. Scuba divers go in depth. Scuba divers wants to understand reasons why things are put in place, but at the same time, they are too slow for the pace we're taking today. So which is the answer? Probably the only answer we can provide is to put together these two elements, creating an holistic approach where the knowledge of the past melts with the new technology, where creative disciplines is encompassed with awareness of the emerging markets, where individuality is nourished but solo players are not encouraged, and where people can learn how to put in place thinking processes, where the new statement of future fashion can be started. So, I'm sorry if I was late with my timing. I hope it was not too boring, but in case any of you have some questions or wants to say something, I would be very happy. Thank you.
questions? We have time for one. No? Okay. Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you very
It was
much.
very, very insightful.
Thank you very much.
Please make it over to Hall 1 for Starch. It's about to start in about 10 minutes. And thank you.
Thanks.